Hi. Welcome to another random ramblings where I'm going to be talking about SuperRAD's The Big Old Dragon Age Origins Retrospective featuring David Gator. And yeah, it's a Dragon Age Origins video. Um, Pretty much. And it's not that I disagree with the video. I like Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age is my favorite franchise ever, and I like it quite a bit. My only issue with it is more of the sort of tendency that I see with a lot of Dragon Age Origins fans and how they treat the sequels and whatnot. And I'm not going to go through the entire video because it's 9 hours, and also because it's not necessarily the point I'm making. If I go through it, it's mostly going to be me agreeing with them. But what I want to do is sort of examine this, and he does it mostly in the intro, of what a lot of Dragon Age Origins fans value compared to the future games. And yeah, I am going to 2 times speed this because one, you should go watch the video yourself. It's well crafted enough, and two, I don't need to, you know, 1 time speed it because
Dragon Age is a weird series for me. I'm a big fan of Bioware games, from the original Baldur's Gate to Knights of the Old Republic, from Mass Effect to Dragon Age. Bioware has amassed an exceptional, though not always timeless, library of games, and not everything was pure gold. While some series ended up in better hands before Bioware could inevitably fumble them, others weren't so lucky. KOTOR went from a fantastic Bioware-style RPG with an even better sequel developed by Obsidian to the Old Republic, an MMO set in the KOTOR universe that proved to be a pretty disappointing inclusion that has only managed to marginally improve with time. Mass Effect was a strong trilogy series that was lambasted for its poor ending to the point that developers felt the need to rework it to make it slightly less mediocre. This was followed by Andromeda, which admittedly received a fair portion of undue hate, but ultimately deserved the lion's share of the criticism.
Now, so far, I don't disagree with some of it. SWTOR, I think, is just the conclusion of what Bioware becomes and whatnot. Bioware has always been very cinematic. Mass Effect Andromeda I like quite a bit. There are some issues, but I do like quite a bit. And the ending for Mass Effect I can get as well, but it's just the ending for Mass Effect 3, not really the game itself.
Targeting it. Then you have a series like Dragon Age, a series that, in my opinion, only managed one good game, instead continuing to steamroll forward and threaten to ruin the series further with each new release. That might sound harsh, but a game like Dragon Age suffered the most from Bioware's game design philosophy at the time. A large part of the Bioware formula in this era starts with designing an RPG and then iterating it into a more hybridized genre of game.
And the thing is, I was like, wait a minute. So the issue with the later games is because they make an RPG, but then they move away from it. That's not really a problem. Sure, personally, for him, that is an issue, but like, it's a thing that I think is so weird that people kind of forget about Bioware games, Bioware games were never really gameplay focused. They were, obviously. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are fairly gameplay focused. They're D&D simulations, basically. But they weren't just D&D simulations, right? And that's the thing that I think is a really big issue with a lot of it. That it sort of expects Bioware to be something it isn't.
Mass Effect, for example, initially focused on a more pure RPG style, before eventually being hybridized with the third-person shooter genre.
And additionally, that pure RPG style, like, what do you mean, dude? Like, oh shit, by pure RPG you mean you could have different guns, and you could have different mods for those guns, and you can have a very wide pool of powers, I guess, but like, it wasn't really an RPG in the sense of you could have a character that was your own, right? If you compare it to other games at the time, like, Obsidian's games, right? Fallout, that obviously wasn't made by Obsidian, that was more in Exile, I believe. Oh no, Black Isle, and whatnot. But like, even when you compare it to those games, it's very clear Bioware doesn't make those kind of games. Bioware has always had curated protagonists. They've always had its stories that were very restrictive of what the player can do.
I found that to be disappointing, but acceptable. At least the setting and gameplay style of Mass Effect already lent itself towards the secondary genre. Dragon Age hasn't been so lucky, however. We've gone from a flawed but amazing RPG experience that could potentially rate with CRPG heavy hitters in the past to a glorified hack-and-slash adventure, and finally to an MMO-light, pseudo-open-world experience that was so large, so boring, and so overstuffed that I still haven't bothered to complete it to this day. This is made all the more tragic by the fact that Dragon Age Origins is one of my favorite games to come out of Bioware since KOTOR and the original Mass Effect. The release of Origins was an interesting one, and one that I eagerly looked forward to. I wasn't fully invested in old-school CRPG experiences yet, but Bioware games helped fuse those aspects into a more robust adventure RPG.
And since he mentioned CRPGs, I think this is the big thing that a lot of Dragon Age Origins fans really dislike about the newer games. They're not CRPGs, which whatever, okay? I never really thought of Bioware as a CRPG company. They've definitely dabbled in it, but that was never the sort of point of Bioware games for me, nor what I think was appealing about them, right? Bioware's always been good about its stories and telling stories through characters, right? Like, that's always been the point of Bioware. That's why Baldur's Gate 1 shifted from more basic companions to more interesting companions, even though it wasn't groundbreaking or as wonderful as it would turn out to be. They started with that sort of idea and expanded upon it to even Dragon Age Inquisition. them saying that Dragon Age Inquisition is a dumbed down MMO, like, yeah, sure, there are elements of it I don't like. I don't like the sort of non-cinematic floaty camera system. I don't like how very wide and open and very unfocused the worlds are. I don't really like that. But the characters are still there. The interesting dynamics between them are still there. Like, I can't really take this seriously when you are very missing a vital aspect of Bioware games, right?
RPG better than most at the time. Mechanically, they were very similar experiences, but Bioware titles were more cinematic at the very least, and often more intricate mechanically when they played with mixing genres. I'd still play a top-down isometric Star Wars CRPG experience, but Knights of the Old Republic would put you at the
And
forefront.
that's the thing, Bioware games were always very cinematic. Like, sure, they had, like, some mechanics and whatnot, but even compared to Dragon Age Origins, like, Dragon Age Origins is simplified, like, to a large degree. Like, later CRPGs would be a lot more complicated. Baldur's Gate 3 is the culmination of a much more complex RPG, right? And even at the time Dragon Age and Dragon Age Origins released, like, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are far more complicated than Dragon Age Origins. Well, Dragon Age Origins' most complicated class is the mage. And that's it. Like, the mage is the most complicated class. But not because it's intricate, you have to really study up on it. It's because there's a lot of spells, right? And you have to decide which school of magic you want to invest into. It's not that complicated. It's just which of the descriptions fits your playstyle more, and then go from there. And yeah, and yeah, this really does disappoint me because, like, again, this shows that Dragon Age Origins fans aren't really focused on what I think is the point of these games, which is, characters, storytelling, and using choices and consequences to tell a story, but rather just, mechanics focused, and this sort of broader thing.
Front of the action. Mass Effect felt like a step further in that direction, sacrificing some of the CRPG elements for the more interactive gameplay of a third-person shooter. I enjoyed both games and played through them both.
Yeah, interactive of a gameplay shooter. Like, okay, sure, but, like, what? Like, was Mass Effect hinging... was the appeal of Mass Effect really its gameplay and not its characters? That was the thing that I liked about it, and that's the thing that I wanted more expanded upon. Do I have an issue with the change of Mass Effect gameplay? Yeah, sure. But my reason for it being changed is not because it's no longer an RPG, because it's inconsistent, right? I think it's weird that for the world building that it went from this, like, oh yeah, what's a big issue with, like, soldiers behind enemy lines? They'll run out of ammunition eventually, right? That's not one of the only issue, it's one of many issues. But Mass Effect said, oh, you have these small blocks of metal that get scraped up and then get propelled by, like, through some mass acceleration, which at the speed and velocity of a bullet that does damage, right? Very easy, very simple. The gun never has to reload. You have to worry about it overheating, but that's the interest of it. You never have to worry about it reloading, right? And I think that's really cool, But they got rid of that in favor for what? A more third-person shooter gameplay. Was it a bit better? Yeah, sure. But it lost that sort of interesting world building built into the gameplay, And that's what I also want with Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age Origins is interesting. Its gameplay is interesting because it represents the world and its sort of, how combat works very well,
multiple times over the years, so the announcement of Dragon Age was a welcome one. It boasted a return to the more classic style that had benefited KOTOR, while using their work on Mass Effect to make this new series even more cinematic than before. It promised a deep RPG, but one for the masses, something that would take over the market by including the game mechanics hardcore players want, while also including aspects for the more casual audiences as well. Whether or not they succeeded in that is still up in the air at the moment. I'll have more to say on that as we go, but I do think that despite how silly the game ended up looking at the time, with its stiff, bony characters, some of whom have this sickly complexion...
I don't know. I have no real reason why people... I don't really understand why people dislike the look of Dragon Age. I think it was cool.
To them that doesn't seem intentional, Dragon Age Origins was still a revolutionary step within the market and genre, one that helps scratch the itch of players who are looking for a fresh RPG experience. Needless to say, I was a very excited consumer at the time. The idea of controlling a party of adventurers, being able to pause in combat, and take on a more tactical view similar to the older games of the genre really fascinated me. Add on the fact that I was such a fan of Mass Effect at the time, and it felt like Bioware could do no wrong. It's funny saying all of this considering where we are today. The release of Baldur's Gate 3 has changed the landscape of gaming in a way that many of us have wished for, but was deemed impossible. An extremely popular, deep role-playing experience in the CRPG genre that has so many choices within.
And that's the thing, right? Like, yeah, I guess, but, like, Dragon Age Origins, even in Dragon Age Origins, you never had that deep role-playing experience because you always played that character who existed in the world before you, right? Larian is not offering the same sort of depth that Dragon Age Origins did. And yeah, sure, the Origins equivalent for Baldur's Gate 3, like with Gale, Lizelle, and stuff like that, right? Like, sure, But that's not what we're talking about when we mean origins, like in Dragon Age Origins, right? It's a character who existed in the world, and you get to play like a moment in their life, right? Like that's different, and that still enforces character and characterization and you know restrictions to the player, you know. And that's something I don't really get why people keep harping on Bioware for, like, yeah, this is what it's meant to be. This is what Bioware's always. No, they haven't. Even in KOTOR, right? You play as Darth Revan, a predetermined character, a person who had a life and backstory before the player stepped in, and whose path is not dictated by the players, but is rather dictated by the character. And I honestly just don't get it.
That no two runs will feel quite the same. A game chock full with so much to do that can affect the storyline that it almost feels overwhelming. In comparison, Dragon Age and many other RPGs from its time feel especially limited. Choice was a big factor for game design in this era. It still is, but choice and morality were a major factor, especially with the release of Mass Effect. While some games tried to make every choice matter, most would end up generally being a selection of two options that led to the same conclusion, usually with a bonus of some form depending on what you chose. It feels like we may be past that now. Though this progression can cause older games of this type to show their age, that doesn't make them less valuable, especially considering how Dragon Age was also pushing for as much choice as possible at the time. A game like Dragon Age Origins still holds up today because we can see what the intent was and accept the limit.
And you can see this very big focus on choice, right? And it's choice is the thing that's being focused on here. Dragon Age Origins fans oftentimes deliberately focus on what you get to choose to do rather on what you are doing actually, right? And that's the thing that I find very just uninteresting, right? Like, sure, I get to do a lot of different things. Does any of that really mean anything? The thing I don't particularly like about Baldur's Gate 3 is because with Dragon Age Origins, at least a lot of the choices, while they may not have different conclusions, right, they still answer very interesting questions, right? Like the one he's shown on screen, Bronca versus Caradon, right? Like, who do you side with, right? Why do you side with them? Who do you think is better? Like, those are interesting questions, right? Caradon obviously wants to destroy the Anvil, and the Anvil is a destructive force that's been used to destroy political opponents and people and undesirables, right? And Bronco wants to use it because, it's going to be helpful for the Darkspawn and whatnot, which is, like, interesting, right? And this also plays in as well when you consider the choice you have for King. Balin would absolutely send people to become golems that he finds undesirable, right? That's so true, but Harrowmont, maybe it's a bit different, maybe it's not. But that's the thing that it asks you. It asks a really interesting question, and while I may always choose Caradon, I still think it's really cool how the choice is framed. But with Baldur's Gate 3, it's just like, okay, why do you decide with the Absolute? Do you want power? I guess. Like, do you want to affect people negatively? I guess not. It's very simple questions, very simple answers. And while in Dragon Age there are a lot of very easy answers, right, the other side isn't completely disregarded,
We can realize how some of these design decisions weren't considered limited but revolutionary. This allows the game to extend its lifespan and preserve a place within the culture of the gaming market. One of the things that hooked me early on was the title, Dragon Age Origins. I'd always assumed subtitles were saved for sequels, so I was confused by one's appearance here, but it makes sense once you see what the game is trying to accomplish. Dragon Age Origins is all about exactly that, origins. Your race and class determine which backgrounds you are able to unlock, and those backgrounds play a major role within the starting hours of the game, and can have rippling effects throughout the rest of your experience. One of the main antagonists in the game is even more antagonistic if you play as a human noble, for example. Each of these backgrounds are fairly long prologues leading into the true prologue at Ostagar, a means of introducing you to the world of Dragon Age and the land of Ferelden, where the entire world was painstakingly crafted by David Gator before moving on to any other aspect of the story, and I believe it shows.
Yeah, well, I think there's some perception that being a...
Now, we'll skip these David's Gator sections. I do think these are really great, and there are some amazing moments. Some very interesting ones that I didn't really find out anywhere else, such as on Morrigan and the whole... they use the old god baby to for Morrigan's development rather than for a world-ending, shattering type of stuff, which I think is quite interesting as well. And also when he talked about the mages and how he wanted to showcase how, if mages actually existed, what would actually be the political ramifications, right? And I think he did it brilliantly. And also he did something that I definitely agree with, which is you can't really compare mages to other oppressed groups in our real life because mages actually have demonic, can actually turn into demons, right? And that's a whole different type of math. And it's brilliant, right? You should definitely, at least if you want to watch this video, just watch it for these segments because I think these are really well done and they're really good. But I will be skipping these parts.
is because for most people, they don't read the codexes, but the fact that the codexes exist, they appreciate. So when a codex pops up, they're like, ah, yes, I love how much information is in this game. But
Again, it's funny that Baldur's Gate 3 released so close to me making this video because there are so many design parallels between the two. Both have settings inspired by high fantasy, with Baldur's Gate focusing on D&D's Forgotten Realms, and Dragon Age taking a more Tolkien-based approach. The devs actually stated they wanted this to be the gaming equivalent of Lord of the Rings, which is just an insane thing to say. This could be considered a failed venture depending on who you ask, and since you're here watching my video, I'm going to say that it was. This isn't the gaming equivalent of Lord of the Rings. Now, both games created an experience where you could recruit and befriend companions who would react to your actions and come to love or despise you based on them. Many of those characters had prevalent backstories and lore that affect your decisions moving forward and the fate of the world and your ending. There's major differences as well, of course. Dragon Age is incredibly limited in comparison to Baldur's
Affect the ending, I guess, with Morrigan and Alistair, but like, I think this is weird to say. What do you mean? Like, how does Liliana affect the ending of Dragon Age Origins? Like, none of the Baldur's Gate companions that affect like these sort of endings, I guess, are Lizelle, Gale, and who else? I guess Ascended Astarion. He would definitely affected. Yeah, that's it. I mean, I guess you have a Will who becomes the Duke. That also affects it. Yeah, but not much else, right? And also, since it's a... Yeah, there's not much else. Like, Dragon Age Origins has Alistair and Morrigan with the Dark Ritual and Alistair becoming the king. Like, that affects it. But, like, none of the other companions really affect the endings. I'm not sure what they mean by that. Sure, you get a different slide, I guess, but... that's not much, I guess. I wouldn't really count it as affecting the endings. That's very weird.
Gate 3, and one game is real-time with pause combat, while the other is entirely turn-based. The differences are there, and I would be lying if I said I didn't believe Baldur's Gate 3 had managed to completely snuff out much of the competition, but with the similarities there, and with how prevalent Larian's new game has become...
And snuff out the competition, it's like, why... And again, this is weird, the Dragon Age Origins fans' brain rot, right? Which is, they assume that that BioWare is trying to be like Baldur's Gate 3, but failing, right? Which is they're not, dude. Like, BioWare has clearly not shown to be trying to beat Baldur's Gate 3, but failing, you know? And this is the thing that I just find so annoying, you know? It's like, okay, I guess people believe this, but like, did you not play these games? What are the majority of the time you're doing? You're not making choices and decisions at every bloody turn. You're not doing that. What you're doing is you're interacting with characters, you're going through the story, and it's a bit linear. It's far linear. Like, Dragon Age, BioWare games are non-linear in the fact that you can choose different locations. He even mentions it in this video. But like, you were never able to just fight the Archdemon head-on, right? You were never able to just go into Ostagar, find the Archdemon and kill him, right? That is never an option, you know? It's very linear in that experience. All the locations, you can choose which ones you want to go to first, but in the end, you still have to go to every single one of them. And that's the thing that like I like a lot about Dragon Age and BioWare games in general, because you still have to go through the story beats and experience them, and you can get context, reference, and it can build towards something. While with games like Baldur's Gate 3, and what I dislike about them is that you don't really get that, right? You never really get to understand what's going on, because the game is so focused on choices and consequences, to its detriment, in my opinion. And I don't get how Dragon Age Origins fans can think that this game is about choices and consequences, when it's clearly that's not the majority of the time you're doing, and it's not what the choices and consequences are leading to. It isn't just for the sake of it, there is a purpose to it.
I think people looking to scratch an itch after playing Baldur's Gate may be interested in giving Origins a try, and I think because of that, this video may be beneficial to you. Today I'd like to explore the game that quickly became one of my favorites at the time of its release, a game I played countless times.
And just to replay that quickly?
And with how prevalent Larian's new game has become, I think people looking to scratch an itch after playing Baldur's Gate may be interested in giving Origins a try, and I think because of that...
If they're going to give Origins a try, the thing they're going to find out is, wow, this game's old. And wow, this game's not like Baldur's Gate 3. Like, you can see the inspiration, but like, it's clearly not Baldur's Gate 3. Right? There isn't that much Larian can borrow from Dragon Age Origins, other than romances, and that's it. Nothing much else is borrowed.
This video may be beneficial to you. Today I'd like to explore the game that quickly became one of my favorites at the time of its release, a game I played countless times, and one that I believe is worthy of all the praise and accolades it received. A game that I consider to have one of the most unfortunate trajectories in how it progressed over the years, even if I also believe that it doesn't dull the shine of the original. Dragon Age is a wonderful story and a wonderful land, full of characters and companions.
And that, wait, let me just...
Companions, alongside some hit-or-miss dialogue, all packaged in with BioWare staples, such as their childish dialogue choices, stiff animations, satisfying...
Childish dialogue choices. And that's the thing I don't really get. Like, oh shit, childish dialogue choices. It's like, okay, sure. Like, sure, there are some weird, wacky ones, like, I'll murder you because I can, dumbass. Like, sure, those are a bit of an issues. Like, I don't know, dude.
Combat, and both linear and open exploration. Despite being similar in many ways, Baldur's Gate's storyline took an act-based approach. Meanwhile, Dragon Age once again does what BioWare does best. Give you...
That implies something that it's not. Baldur's Gate 3 isn't an act-based approach. It's a non-linear approach, divided by acts. You can go to Act 2 in Act 1, like, just if you want to. You don't have to finish Act 1 to go to Act 2. And while you may have to finish Act 2's main quest to go to Act 3, it's not that difficult. It's like one... You can go there so quickly. There's nothing really preventing you from doing that.
A bunch of locations to explore, so you can collect various things, and use those things to head into the game's conclusion. KOTOR does it, Mass Effect does it, I'm sure plenty of other BioWare games have done it as well. If you enjoy this content, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, as it helps me continue to make these videos. With that out of the way, I'm SuperRAD, and this is the big Dragon Age Origins Retrospective.
Yeah, you should watch the rest of the video. It is well made, but I do disagree fundamentally, and I just want to use this again as a showcase to what I dislike about a lot of Dragon Age Origins fans, and that is, it feels like they kind of miss the point, right? Like, they think this game is something that it's not, and I just don't get it, you know? Like, okay, congrats that you didn't really get the point of what the game was trying to do, you know? It's like, this game is not about choices and consequences. It's a CRPG experience, but it's not a CRPG experience. Not everything is serving to the CRPG experience, you know? And that's the thing I just find so weird, you know? Dragon Age to me has always been about story, lore, characters, and using choices and consequences to mean a point, right? And they've done that. Dragon Age 2 has done that. Dragon Age Inquisition has done that. Every BioWare's game has done that, except for maybe Anthem, but that's a different story entirely. And yeah, like, I've enjoyed those games a lot because I am in line with what BioWare is doing, and I like what BioWare is doing. Baldur's Gate 3 is nowhere near what a BioWare game is. It just isn't. The game doesn't want to force the player to do anything, doesn't want to limit them. Well, BioWare does, but they do it for a reason, for the story and for the characters, you know? Like, you have permanent companions you can't really get rid of, or you can get rid of them in very extraordinary circumstances. If you're not cheating, if you're not using the DLC packs, you can give Alistair, you know, these pranks to get negative 50 approval with him, and then you do that enough, and then what do you see? Oh, he disapproves and he wants to leave. Like, yeah, Alistair wants to do that. Morgan, I think, will also leave as well, but then come back at the end to do the dark ritual. But yeah, like those companions can go, but only under extraordinary circumstances. You can't ask them to leave because the game wants you to have them, to keep them, and I think that's good. I think it's good for the game to have that. And as BioWare progressed and has made companions more mandatory, you know, less, and gives you less ways to get rid of them, you know, I think that's a good thing. It makes the story better, it makes those characters better, it makes the world better, because now you can have these companions actually interact with it. And it's something that I'm looking forward to with Dreadful, you know? There aren't a lot of BioWare games out there. So yeah. But yeah, just to wrap it up, I feel like a lot of Dragon Age Origins fans just missed the point. You know, I'm sorry that this game isn't what you want it to be. This game doesn't really exist. But like, you have Baldur's Gate 3. You have Larian as a studio. I don't want BioWare to become this kind of chasing what Baldur's Gate 3 is, because that's not what they're about. If they want to do that, then sure, that's fine. But like, for me personally, I don't want that at all. But yeah. Anyways, the video for this will be in the description below. You can go check it out yourself. It is, again, well made. I think so. And if you don't really want to watch it, please do watch it for the David Gator interview bits. It's wonderful, and I absolutely adore hearing more about David Gator's thoughts. And if you want to know actually more about Dragon Age's development, I do recommend looking at a guy called Mark Darrow. He does a lot of also great videos as well, going through the development process and what it went through from an executive producer side. It's pretty cool. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this edition of Random Ramblings, me talking about something I don't particularly like. So yeah, enjoy.